Hey, Editor Ryan, how long has it been since someone argued or complained about Logan Paul so that I could make a video off of it? Oh wow, it's been that long. Alright, good. Time to make another one. But first, roll that intro. Hey, Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about the most recent thing people are complaining about, which happens to be that Logan Paul wore a $500,000 Charizard to the Floyd Mayweather fight. Now, as a bit of context, Logan Paul obviously doesn't just do Pokemon. That's probably the smallest of the various things that he does. But his most recent stunt has been to fight arguably the best boxer of the modern era of boxing. And unsurprisingly, he was defeated, although it was an exhibition match and there was no official winner declared. However, what was surprising was that he did actually go the distance. I believe it was 8 exhibition rounds with Floyd Mayweather. There are also a ton of conspiracies out there that he was actually knocked out and then magically Floyd held him up. So there are some conspiracies out there that maybe the fight was rigged or that this was part of some larger than life money-making stunt, but that's neither here nor there. In today's video, we specifically take a look at what actually happened before and after the fight, which includes, surprisingly enough, a first edition base set Charizard. Now, specifically, the first edition base set Charizard that Logan Paul walked out with is not your regular run-of-the-mill Charizard. I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining this particular card because it's important to my overall opinion as well as the arguments that I'm going to go ahead and make in this video. Logan Paul walked out with a BGS Pristine 10 Charizard. Now, on screen right now, you're going to see the Beckett population report for this card, and bear in mind, there are tons of first edition Charizards that have been graded with PSA, perhaps even some with CGC that haven't emerged on the market yet. But for Beckett, it's a really interesting conundrum, because in the past anyway, Beckett was considered to be the more difficult grading service, and getting a black label would be a huge deal. Unfortunately, as you can see, there is no black label perfect 10 Charizard, and bear in mind, Beckett grades on 4 different scales and then aggregates that up into one larger final grade. And so having a pristine black label 10 would effectively mean that you got a 10 on each of the 4 subgrades. No Charizard first edition card exists like that at the time I'm recording this video, and it's very unlikely that that is ever to change. Now, of the cards that exist, the highest ones that have ever been graded are pristine 10s. Those are the gold label 10s, and they rise to a level above Gem Mint, at least according to Beckett's grading standards. On screen right now, you'll see the population report as it's broken down, as well as the individual subgrades, so hopefully you get a better idea of how rare these cards are. These are considered to be the cream of the crop, not the PSA 10 first edition base set Charizards, believe it or not. So these are the cards, but bear in mind there are only 3 of them in the world. Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at this article. So obviously, the article goes ahead and says like, oh, most boxers will walk in with diamond necklaces and expensive jewelry, but Logan Paul wore a $500,000 first edition Charizard. Now, despite the massive spotlight that he put on the Nintendo collectibles, many players seem furious with the move, and many worry that his promotion of the hobby will only encourage scalpers to jump in and buy up everything. Let's stop right there and literally go over the point that I just proved, which is there are literally only 3 of these cards in existence, meaning you really have to be some type of scalper in order to be able to pull that off. Moving on in the article, it says that, there has been a history, obviously, as we all know, over the course of 2020 and early 2021, where as a result of Logan's actions as well as many other things, there has been a sudden spike in demand for Nintendo collectibles, and as a result of that, we've seen a lot of scalping. So obviously, this channel and many other channels have kind of followed along that epic saga just to kind of see where we're at. And so, the article even goes as far as to point out that, Logan said it's worth investing in stocks. So when the YouTuber wore a first edition Charizard during his June 6th boxing match, many were not happy. Obviously, one thing that was interesting that I didn't even know happened is that immediately after the fight, when he showed off the Charizard, hashtag Charizard began trending worldwide on Twitter, and obviously many people took to social media to voice their concerns that a new wave of scalping could be reignited by the stunt. Now, I will go ahead and disclose my very clear biases right now because I think it's important to do so. First things first, I am very heavily invested and collecting vintage Pokemon cards. So whenever someone shows a vintage Pokemon card in front of millions of people, I'm immediately happy. So I don't want anybody to get it twisted. I am what I am, and that is a vintage collector, and I'm very happy when my vintage collection goes up in value. The second thing is that I am a firm believer that Logan Paul is not the main driver here in terms of what we've seen in the hobby. A lot of people are quick to forget that there was also a global health pandemic that shut down a lot of the US's ability to produce Pokemon cards, specifically when states like Texas, where most of, if not all of, English Pokemon cards for America are produced, were shut down because of incredibly high coronavirus case levels throughout the course of 2020. So, in no uncertain terms, there are many factors why there was less product on store shelves, and scalpers are simply a symptom of that, because if there's high enough demand and low enough supply, a scalper is successful when he or she is able to jump in and essentially act like a middleman charging a premium. Now, we've gone over this in extensive detail in the past, but effectively, scalpers only win when they can beat you to the store shelves or to the online retailer, and when they can charge a premium. And if there's high enough demand, people will compete to buy the products they are selling, meaning they can consistently raise their prices and yet consistently make increasing margins and profits. So a lot of people blame Logan Paul, but don't realize that he wasn't the person running into store shelves and grabbing stuff up and selling it. And then the logical counter argument that you're going to make to me would be, oh, well, he shined a spotlight on this, and that's why I can't get a pack of cards at Target. But bear in mind, scalpers will scalp no matter what. Logan Paul doesn't do 3090s, 3080s, and 3060s, and yet for some reason you can't find those at your local Best Buy to build a computer with either. There's a reason, and it's because people will act, unfortunately, in their best interest and purchase things that they know they can sell for resale value. Did Logan Paul shine a light on this hobby? Yes. Was there both positive and negative outcomes to that? Yes. But he is not the main driver here. And I think it's more important than ever to double down and realize that there are many, many factors that drive this. Like, if Pokemon was the only thing getting scalped right now, I would totally understand. But lumber is at all-time highs. GPUs are at all-time highs, and Pokemon cards are kinda at all-time highs, as well as sports cards, as well as tons of other things. So singularly blaming Logan Paul for the Pokemon problem we're currently in is a little short-sighted, in my opinion. Next up, obviously, are these very well-informed social media comments. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time and go through those because honestly they make my heart hurt. So, you know, the article right here has a couple different folks. The first one says it's Logan Paul's fault that Pokemon cards are getting scalped recently. I really doubt that, Chief. He's the reason why scalpers exist. No, he's not the reason they exist. The reason they exist is because there's profit to be made and there are people still willing to pay above MSRP for Pokemon card product. Well, there goes the chance of me getting a single pack in 6+ more months. I sincerely doubt that. I did a video on it. YouTube, as a community, did a video on it. And then, honestly, I'm sure there's tons of pictures on the interwebs showing how product is being increased on store shelves. And that is direct evidence to the fact that Logan Paul was not the main problem here. Again, there was a significant decline in supply over the past 18 months or so, mainly due to the fact that many of the production facilities were impacted and were not able to produce at pre-pandemic levels. And now they're finally getting a chance to do so as more and more of the states begin to open up and can resume production at increased facilities. In addition to that, let's not forget the fact that Pokemon also doubled down and said they would increase production at the overhead level, meaning not only would they be using the production facilities they already have, but they would also go out of their way to address the increasing demand by increasing supply, meaning we're going to get a whole bunch more production facilities up and running so that we can print more cards. And then finally but not least, does he even know anything about Pokemon besides the price of the cards in his hands? The last time I flexed my cards was in the 90s, and it was never about the money. We did it because the cards look cool, but an adult flexing cards like that is kind of pathetic. I don't necessarily agree with that opinion either, because the truth of the matter is, if you have something you're proud of, it shouldn't matter what time it is or how old you are. If you're proud of it, you should be proud of it. Guess what? Many YouTubers have made a living off of showing off what they love, and it doesn't matter if you're an adult, a kid, or something in between. If you're happy about it, be happy about it. I don't see why people have to take something away from him simply because they don't like him. And you know, it's comments like that that kind of slightly hint to the fact that I have a feeling people don't like him and are therefore then just kind of finding any reason to not like him. But interestingly enough, the most interesting of opinions comes a little bit later on in this article. So the next and kind of last section says even prominent Pokemon YouTubers such as Frosted Caribou hit out at Logan Paul and those driving up the prices of collectibles. Quote unquote, it's never enough money for them, period, ever, period. Now the entire tweet was a little bit more interesting. Obviously she says that she's almost positive that if Logan had purchased this, there would have been many articles written about it. And then if not, that means Gary let him borrow it for show just to drive prices up. It's never enough money for them, period, ever, period. So that's the full tweet. And this particular reaction caught my eye, especially in this article. Let's read on. The Logan Paul's rare Beckett 10 is only one of 3 in the entire world, as we just showed on screen, and the YouTuber's card could go up even higher because it was featured in this much publicized match. Despite him genuinely being a fan of Pokemon, some collectors are critical of his focus on the item's value and not the love of the game itself. The 26-year-old has faced accusations of treating the family-friendly hobby as a stock market, and regardless of whether his impact has influenced scalpers in the past, many fans are now worried that his latest stunt will only further drive prices up and as a result encourage sellers to flood the market to try to get in on the action. So let's stop and talk about this again. First things first, he's treating the family-friendly hobby as a stock market. Yes, he is. And guess what? More than half the YouTubers we all watch probably do the same. There is inherently a relationship between Pokemon cards and the value that they carry, and there is no arguing that. And unfortunately, that is the way that is. Obviously, if you want a card, guess what? You have to buy the card. And if the card is worth a certain amount of money, you will have to either pass on that card because it is too expensive, or purchase the card when it is possible for you to do so. So whenever people say like, oh, it's a stock market and people are treating things like investments and commodities, well, yes, that's exactly what they are. They are commodities. Their prices go up and down in reaction to supply and demand, and I've never understood quite fully the reason why people are so shocked at this. Inherently, when you buy a pack, it is a gamble. You pay $4 for it, and it is what it is. Most times, you will not pull a single card out of that. So I've never really truly understood people's aversions to prices. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every single conversation should fixate on the price of every single card, but you can't ignore the fact that there is a certain amount of, financial decision making that's inherently intertwined. When you pull a rare card, you pull the card because you enjoy the card, and there's no shame in that. And if you just so happen to say, oh wow, that's a $30 card, a $50 card, a $500,000 card, I've never really seen what the real issue is, as long as you are reacting in a way that is balanced and that you appreciate the hobby as much as you do the price. And based on everything I've seen, Logan and many other people and content creators do this all the time. So, again, one of those things where perhaps people are taking their disdain for the person and applying it to his otherwise benign actions that mirror exactly what we see in the hobby all the time. It's just that when person A does it, it's totally fine because it's person A, but when Logan Paul does it, it's completely wrong because it's Logan Paul. The other thing is, his latest stunt will only further drive prices up and as a result encourage sellers to flood the market and try to get in on the action. Encourage sellers to flood the market. Well, sellers can only sell what they have, and again, there's only 3 of those cards in the world. A lot of people, at least based on what I'm reading from these comments, seem to fear that his actions are going to influence the modern market. I would understand their argument if there was a more clear-cut definition for him trying to manipulate the modern market. He's not. He's not walking around with Chilling Reign booster boxes or battle styles or, a graded like Rosa from whatever set that was from, I think Cosmic Eclipse. He's not doing that. He's not telling people that is a $500,000 card. He's telling people that a card that is now approximately 25 years old is worth $500,000. And there are only 3 of those cards in existence, and it happens to be one of the most popular Pokemon cards and popular Pokemon in existence. So, the whole idea that encouraging sellers to flood the market doesn't seem logical to me because they're only going to be flooding the market with vintage stuff, and that's a completely separate realm from the modern era of Pokemon cards. The other thing to bear in mind is that while vintage is no longer being produced, modern is. And again, based off everything we've seen and all of the different posts and all of the different videos and all of the different news we've gotten, Pokemon is printing, and they are printing maliciously so. Bear in mind, back in 2016, and this is a little bit before some of these commenters were around, we saw a similar fluctuation in the hobby. For the 20th anniversary, we got a pretty big spike in popularity. They couldn't keep stuff on store shelves, and what Pokemon did, especially right around the Sun and Moon era, is they printed a lot of the new sets, and that was in a direct attempt to address the issues regarding supply. They knew demand was high, and they simply took a little bit more time to adjust and increase supply to meet that demand. Obviously, no company wants to have their stuff sit on store shelves, so it's totally understandable that they would wait a little bit, feel it out, and then adjust supply as needed. And a similar situation is happening right now. However, it's important to note that for many commentators, they may not necessarily be recognizing that pattern. And that's another thing that I really wanted to point out, is that there is a very demonstrated pattern here. There are times in the Pokemon card hobby where in its history, it's increased in popularity, then Pokemon has to increase supply to meet demand, and then things will level out again. And it's the same thing with things like prices, popularity, etc., etc. There are just waves and patterns of this going up and then down, and then up and then down, and that's the whole point. So Pokemon is simply reacting to that right now, and if you've been around long enough in this hobby, it's not hard to recognize that as a pattern. Unfortunately, if you are a little bit less informed or perhaps aren't able to pick up on that pattern, that could be why you are seeing things a little bit more short-sighted as, oh, it's purely a price perspective kind of thing. Again, has Logan Paul changed this hobby in a weird way? Yes. Again, some things are good about it, other things are bad about it. But at the same time, there are so many more factors that go into this that it's basically not logical to argue that Logan Paul is the sole single contributor to the Pokemon trading card game hobby's state. There are a lot of things that went wrong. There are a lot of things that could have been fixed or addressed prematurely in order to front run issues like this. Pokemon didn't choose to do any of those things. And so now we have a sort of reactive reaction, meaning they're addressing things after the problem was identified, and here we are. So that's just my argument. The one other thing I wanted to briefly touch on is specifically the comment of, if not, that means Gary let him borrow it for show just to drive prices up. It's never enough money for them. Now, here's my quick little disclaimer. I don't mean to chirp out anybody in these videos. I simply mean to show a different perspective to the opinions that we're seeing. Because especially when we have folks commenting or, producing content on a very high level or in a big stage, there is a chance that very one-sided biases or one-sided views are going to be, pushed as the narrative more so than the counter argument. And so I simply mean to introduce a counter argument here. It's never enough money for Gary. I personally don't think that's fair to say. The reason I say that is because back when, I know for a fact, I was in diapers when Gary was collecting Pokemon cards. And back then, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Instagram. You couldn't just hop on YouTube, get picked up by the algorithm, and then magically start making money and catching sponsorships and opening up new sets 2 weeks before they released. That wasn't a thing back when Gary was collecting Pokemon cards. In many ways, Gary is also partially responsible for bringing Pokemon cards to the United States and getting PSA to recognize them as trading cards that could be graded and setting the standards for how those cards would be graded. Ditto BGS. So Gary's been around for a very long time. Longer than some of us have been alive, and certainly longer than many of us have had channels or even a small following. As a result, it is my opinion that Gary has earned the right to be about his money, because he loved these cards when they were worth nothing. And now, when they're worth everything, I think, over the past 25 years, he has absolutely earned a right to sit here, admire his cards, and realize that they're worth a lot of money. Because he was one of the first ever collectors of this hobby, and he was one of the people who set the standards for what it means to be a collector in this hobby. And so, if he wants to look at his card and say, wow, that's worth $500,000, I hope it grows in value over time, I totally agree. Because, again, he's earned the right to do so simply based on the fact that he's been around longer than any of us could have even fathomed. And so, when people say, like, oh, Gary's about his money now, like, yeah, I would be too. Guess what? I am too. Like, anybody who has any investment in anything hopes that one day it'll increase in value, and whether that be for the sake of simply making money, in Gary's case leaving it for his kids, or in my case hoping to complete a collection goal that I have in mind, I hope all of you and your investments go through. So to say that like it's never about it's never enough money for them, I think that might have been a very one-sided argument, to say the least, because on the other side of that equation is the fact that Gary's been around longer than any of us have been. And so there's a very, very clear demonstrated history of him caring about this hobby, fostering this hobby, and helping so many other collectors along the way, that he has demonstrated in his 25 or some odd years that it's not about money, bro. Logan Paul, you could say other things about, right? He came in at a very opportune time, but not Gary. I don't think that was a fair statement to make, but that I will very clearly disclaim is my own personal opinion. But yeah, friends, so in summary, people aren't happy about Logan Paul. Obviously, they probably never will be. I personally think that the good news is that he has, again, shown a card off to a different part of the world, and hopefully people begin realizing how rare and truly awesome these cards are. I don't personally believe any of us should be a gatekeeper and say that, oh, people can't enter because they're boxing fans and Logan Paul introduced them to it. We find Pokemon through the avenues which we do, and it's totally fine if you choose to enter the hobby at this time. The bad news is that obviously, as Logan has showed off this card, there's probably a chance we'll see a little bit of reaction on the back end. Again, I think for the most part that will be counteracted because Pokemon has also stepped up their game. They're printing a lot more, and things I haven't mentioned in this video, but folks like PSA, CGC, BGS, they're adjusting to the grading card spectrum of things. So, they're taking away from the profit margin that quote-unquote scalpers will be able to make. And then stores like Target and GameStop are addressing the problems with scalpers running into stores, bum rushing, and buying everything out. So again, in the grand scheme of things, I think we're far better set up so that we shouldn't see the same type of scalpering that happened back in the day happen right now. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. As I always say, you could have been anywhere on the internet, but you chose to spend some time with me, and that means the world. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you learned something new today, or you were exposed to a different perspective that you might not have previously considered. And don't forget to subscribe to join the Gengar gang if you're not already a member. But other than that, friends, thanks again for watching, and we will talk soon. Peace.